Hello everyone, welcome to Fertilizing the Landscape. This is an excellent chapter on the fertilized practices in your horticulture business. It's kind of a lengthy slide presentation. It's about 49 or 50 slides, I think. But if you need to hit the pause button, hit the pause button. I'm attaching the slides with the lectures. That way you will have it for your reference. And we're going to start by talking about the essential elements. An element is classified essential if the plant fails to complete its life cycle in its absence. It's got to be there for the plant or the weed or any of the herbaceous woody plants that we're dealing with. Has to complete its life cycle. The action of the element in the plant is specific. It cannot be replaced by any other element, so there's not a substitute for it. And it has a direct effect on the plant as opposed to indirect, such as repelling insects or animals. Our essential elements are divided into macro elements, CHO, NPK, Ca, Mg, and S for sulfur, and our micro elements, iron, manganese, boron, copper, molybdenum, chlorine, and nickel. Our carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen atoms are obtained from air and water. They cannot be added as fertilizers. So these are going to have to be obtained from Mother Nature. We can't supplement our carbon, hydrogen, or oxygen. They're going to have to be gotten through natural processes. Nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium are referred to as the fertilizer elements, and they are represented by N, P, and K. Iron, Fe, is referred to as the border element, and some sources consider iron a macronutrient and others a minor element. Here in the chart, we can see that nitrogen promotes green foliage, phosphorus is going to promote strong roots, and potassium is for the overall healthy growth of your plant material. Nitrogen. It is the most important fertilizer element. It is most frequently limiting nutrient in landscape soils, so our soils are lacking it. And it is the greatest concern amongst horticulture professionals and landscape managers. The addition of nitrogen results in the greatest response in growth, as if you are already in the lawn care industry, you may have experienced that. It is the most common nutrient applied to any landscape site. And nitrogen fertilizer rates for turf grass and woody plants should be specified as recommended pounds per nitrogen rather than pounds of a specific fertilizer. All right, some math problems to start off with. You guys like me for that. You wish to apply 2 pounds of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet as urea. Urea is 4500, and it is 45% nitrogen. Therefore, if you're going to apply 2 pounds of nitrogen, you need to divide it by the 0.45, which is represented by the 45% nitrogen, and that's going to equal to 4.4 pounds of product. Another example, 9 pounds of ammonium nitrate, which is 3300, is required to apply 3 pounds of nitrogen. So to get that, we're going to take our 3 and we're going to divide it by 0.33, and that'll give us the 9. 9 pounds of product is required to apply 3 pounds of nitrogen to our site. And last but not least, we're looking at a phosphate problem. 10 pounds of superphosphate, 020, is required to apply 2 pounds of P2O5, which is how we represent it in our fertilizer bag, guys. And there's a slide a little bit later in the presentation that explains this a little bit more for you. But 10 pounds of superphosphate is required to apply 2 pounds of phosphate per 1,000 square feet. So we're going to have to divide 2 by our 0.20 is going to give us 10 pounds of the product. Nitrogen fertilization of trees. We're going to talk about the surface area method. An all-purpose recommendation for most soils and moderate rates of tree growth is 2 to 4 pounds of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet of crown area. Now, 30 to 50% of the nitrogen should be in slow release form. It should just be released very slowly through the growing season. It shouldn't be applied. It shouldn't be a fertilizer that once applied, all the nitrogen is readily available for the plant. You want it to be slowly released. And when we talk about the crown of the tree, we're usually considering the inside drip line or edge of the canopy. So here in the diagram, we have our drip line equivalent to the canopy or crown. So we're recommending that we apply 2 to 4 pounds of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet of crown area. So if this is 100 feet by 10, there's 1,000 square feet. And you'd actually have to go out and physically measure that, guys. If the fertilizer is applied within the drip line of the tree, there are more than enough active roots to take up the material. Some arboricultural textbooks recommend to fertilize to the estimated root zone, which is 2 times the crown radius. However, horticulture studies have shown that this is not advantageous to the plant. So you got some arborists in arboriculture practices that are recommending 2 times the crown, which come out to the root spread to fertilize, but our studies are showing that if we do it within the crown area, that should be more than enough. Soils with high levels of organic material or organic matter may need less nitrogen. It's getting the nitrogens from the organics. Sandy soils with especially high rainfalls will require more nitrogen. That being because we apply nitrogen, we've got a sandy soil, we get the high rainfalls, all that nitrogen is going to be leached away from the soil. And then evergreen trees need less nitrogen than do the deciduous trees. However, if you have a big area where you've got deciduous trees and large evergreen shrubs, say in a big screening, and you're doing a surface application, you would want to give the rates for the deciduous trees. You want to make sure they get enough. Studies have shown that the extra nitrogen is not going to hurt the evergreen trees or shrubs. Most established trees growing in managed landscapes where turf and shrubs are fertilized with reasonable fertility program will not require the additional nitrogen. As you can see here in the picture, when fertilizing this turf grass, these trees are going to get enough nitrogen to benefit from it. And always remember, never surface apply more than 2 pounds of readily available nitrogen per 1,000 square feet per application beneath trees and turf. And you're going to see that statement quite a bit in this presentation. The caliper method when we're fertilizing our trees. The caliper, or the diameter breast height, is done by most arborists. And when we're talking about the diameter breast height, we're talking about 4.5 feet off the ground, so about chest level. And that's going to be about 4.5 feet up on the trunk. That's where you're going to measure the diameter or circumference of the tree. And common recommendation is that we're going to apply 1/2 pound nitrogen per inch of the diameter breast height. So we have a diameter of this tree of 8 inches. It's 1/2 pound per inch. So we're going to be applying 4 pounds of nitrogen, 4 pounds of nitrogen to this tree based on its diameter breast height. For landscape managers, which most of us are probably going to that field, it's more feasible to calculate nitrogen rates based on square footage of surface area basis rather than measuring each tree on the property. So we're doing a landscape property, and when you're doing our landscape management plans, as we are in this class, it may be difficult to go out and measure 200 diameters of trees. It's a lot easier for us to calculate the square footage of the turf because we can do that through geodata, we can do that through property maps. It's just a lot easier being in the landscape management business to do it per square foot. Now, I recommend if you do have some sick and diseased trees, this is probably when you'd come out and do the diameter breast height measurement. And that way you're creating more of a management plan per tree or for a group of trees on a select property. Guys, I do recommend getting the certified arborist certification. Especially in our area, the Triad area, that is one of the most respected certifications that you can get. I know they offer that each December through Cooperative Extension. It's like a couple days of class, and then the last day you actually sit for the arborist exam. So I do recommend that. Now let's talk about some special situations for trees. We got trees that grow in parking lots, street trees, or even in planters. Here we can see a group of river birch in a parking lot. These trees are, they're going to be, stressed out a little more than a tree planted in somebody's backyard. But we need to base these nitrogen rates on accessible root area, not the crown spread. So for these group of river birch, we're going to base it actually inside the curb. We know, the crown for this one is going to extend out a little bit further. We're just going to base it within the curb. And nitrogen should be applied on the low side of the recommended rates and divided into split applications several times a year as surface application. Or we can do the foliar spray, or by other means, maybe soil injection. So if the rate is recommended for 2 to 4 pounds, we would do the 2 pounds per nitrogen, and we would spread it out several times throughout the year. Upright, columnar, or fastigate trees should be fertilized based on estimated root spread rather than upon their actual crown areas. And see, we have these hornbeams here. These crown areas are smaller. Their roots are going to spread out a little bit more. So we're going to base our fertilization rates on the root spread rather than their actual crown spread, because they're so thin growing. They're narrow, they're tall, they're columnar. We're not going to base it on the crown spread of these trees. We're going to calculate the area of the root zone using a radius equal to this tree's height for rate and application purposes. Timing. Fall is better than or equal to the spring application. You can do both. My preference is fall, just because we're automatically in the fertilized mood. We're putting out nitrogen to our tall fescues, and then nitrogen should be available for the new flush of growth in the spring. So if we do it at the correct time during the fall, that fertilizer is going to be there, especially if it's slow release, for that burst of new growth that happens in the spring. And again, fall is the time that the majority of us are spreading nitrogen to our tall fescue and our cool season grasses. In all cases, be careful of winter damage. Late summer and early fall heavy applications should be avoided, because these can result in a flush of growth on the plant material that's not going to have a chance to get hardened off, and if we get some colder weather, it's going to severely damage the plant, what we call an autumn freeze. Never apply more than 2 pounds of readily nitrogen per 1,000 square feet of broadcast application for trees growing under turf grass. Again, I'm going to stress that to you guys a few more times in this presentation. All right, nitrogen fertilization of shrubs. A rate of 2 to 4 pounds of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet of the bed area is the most common figure used in the trade. 4 pounds, however, is not excessive where there is no turf or ground cover. You can use the 4 pounds. Rhododendrons, azaleas, other Araceae species with shallow roots are injured by the higher rates of quickly available nitrogen. Evergreens respond to lower fertilization rates rather than deciduous trees. We just talked about that. Remember, you don't have to segregate them, because additional nitrogen is not going to harm the evergreens. You would use the rates recommended for your deciduous trees and shrubs. All right, the frequency of nitrogen fertilization, it depends on the type and the age of the tree or shrub. It's going to depend on the objective of the fertility program. Are the trees already stressed out and needing to be brought back to healthy, or do we just need to maintain their health as somebody has taken care of them in the past? You're going to have to be the judge of that as the landscape manager. Soil conditions, it's going to depend on the maintenance level. Is it a park? Is it a highway? Things that are not going to be taken care of quite as much because the budget's lower. And budget is one that we're going to have to consider. Does the client have the money to incorporate a fertility program for the trees and shrubs? And then most trees and shrubs, however, will respond to just one annual application of nitrogen. So if we can, squeeze that into the budget, include that in the landscape management plan, they should be okay. Now remember, a good turf fertilization program may supply all the nitrogen necessary for established woody landscape plants. So if we are going to get to fertilize the park or along the roadside, we're going to be given enough fertilizer for our trees and shrubs. And less maintained areas can be fertilized less frequently, maybe once every 3 to 4 years. Fertilizing at planting. Not really done this. The only thing that we've done actually is maybe incorporate some peat moss, some manure and soil conditioner, kind of mix that. We'll dig the holes with our auger, and the soil that's on top of the ground we'll break open some bags and throw in a couple scoops and just kind of mix that in for the backfill when we're planting. But recommendations can vary from none to 0.1 pound of nitrogen mixed in the backfill or applied to the surface after planting. Container planted trees and shrubs, they're going to respond to the nitrogen a lot quicker and faster than our B&B or our bare rootstock because they contain more roots. Well, bare rootstock has very few roots on it. They can actually mail those to you, via one of the carriers through the mail system. They're not going to have as much roots. Well, bald and burlap trees, they're going to be cut, so they're losing a lot of roots when they're spaded out of the ground. So really our container plants, they've got those roots that's just full in that container. They're going to respond to nitrogen a lot quicker. Consider fertilizing plants in our new low budget landscapes and roadside. So if you do get a contract where you are doing a property that is not going to be maintained as much as a high-end residential, you may want to incorporate this 0.1 pound of nitrogen at planting. But remember, do not apply more than 2 pounds of ready available nitrogen per 1,000 square feet. And here is just an example of mixing in some soil conditioner and manure to the topsoil that you're going to plant around the root ball. Now, let's talk about phosphorus. Most soils contain adequate phosphorus for trees and shrubs. We may not have to put any more for our trees and shrubs. It's more for turf grass. Woody plants by means of mycorrhizae are available to exploit larger volumes of soil for phosphorus than annual crops and turf grass. You're going to hear more of the phosphorus in the turf grass industry. Phosphorus may be limiting or unavailable at soil pH above 7 where it can complex with calcium. Routine addition shows no benefit to woody plants unless it is limited in the soil. It does aid in the establishment of vegetable and other herbaceous transplants, however, and it does contribute to water pollution. And if you've reading in any of the industry magazines, they're always talking about phosphorus pollution, and even some cities and states are putting bans or limitations on the use of phosphorus. If we do use phosphorus, it must be contained in a starter fertilizer. That may be the only time that you can use it. So you just need to check the city and the state and the area that you're working in to see what you can do with the phosphorus. Potassium. Most landscape soils contain adequate potassium for plant growth. It is immobile in heavy textured soil. It is best incorporated at planting or applied to existing trees and shrubs by deep root applications. You can see the gentleman down here do it. Surface application is good if you have shallow roots or a sandy soil without the presence of turf. That sandy soil will let that kind of just leach through the soil and get to the roots of the tree. Larger amounts may cause magnesium deficiency, especially in acidic or sandy soils. Calcium, it's seldom restricting in our soils. It may be limited in acid soils, sandy soils with high rainfall, and acidic peat soils and soils derived from serpentine rock. It can be added as agricultural or dolomitic limestone to acidic soils and as gypsum to alkaline sites, and is most efficiently applied by incorporation before planting. And if we know that we don't use one of the fast-acting limes, that it could take up to several months to a year before we can start seeing changes in that soil pH. Magnesium, add dolomitic limestone or add it as a magnesium source for acidic sites, or we can add Epsom salts in neutral or alkaline soils. Sulfur is either supplied by irrigation water or precipitation, decomposing organic matter, the byproducts that we have in our fertilizers that we use, some of the fungicides that we use, and then actual air pollution can supply enough sulfur for plant growth. We're not really going to have to incorporate this into our maintenance plan or management plan. Iron, the most common micronutrient problem and probably the second most common nutrient deficiency occurring in the landscape. Interveinal chlorosis, it is the yellowing between the green veins, and here we can see a picture from Iowa State. We still have our green veins and we have the yellowing in between it. That is because the plant is deficient in iron. Things that can enhance or increase the chances of interveinal chlorosis is cold weather, wet soils, drought, in areas that we have had root damage. And the pin oak and Eraceaceae species are more common to have interveinal chlorosis, as we can see it right here with this pin oak. Dealing with interveinal chlorosis, we can use iron deficient species or cultivars. It works well in field crops, soybeans being an example, but it's really non-existent with ornamentals. We just should avoid certain plant materials if we know our clients are going to have issues with this, or we're just prone to have it. So we need to avoid the pin oak, silver maples, rhododendron, sweet gum, spirea, birch, hibiscus, crab apples, plums, gardenias, even Bermuda grass, Exorsia species, and bougainvillea. We can do soil acidification. We can add sulfur or aluminum sulfate down to 12 to 18 inches. We can apply iron compounds in organic forms, where we can do synthetic iron chelates, organic complexes. We can do mine tailings, and we can use industrial byproducts. And here we have an example of the synthetic iron chelates. Manganese, second to iron as a deficient micronutrient due to low levels in the soil or unavailability of existing supplies due to soil pH. pH above 6.5 that's converted to a low solubility form in sensitive plants will show deficiency symptoms. It's difficult to distinguish from iron deficiency, hence iron chlorosis. And here I have an example of soybeans, and just in the previous slide that we said, soybeans are kind of resistant to iron chlorosis. So here when we see the interveinal, the coloring, we know that this is probably going to be short in manganese because soybeans are resistant to the iron chlorosis. Zinc deficiency most common on heavily graded soils and in alkaline and calcareous soils of the western United States, aggravated by heavy or long-term use of high phosphate fertilizers. Leaves are yellow and small with shortened internodes if the nutrient is deficient. The application of zinc sulfate is more successful in soils with pH below 6.0. Boron. Plants require extremely small amounts of boron for normal growth. Normal levels are 20 to 80 parts per million. Levels below 20 parts per million are considered deficient, and then anywhere between 80 to 500 is toxic depending on the plant materials we are talking about. It is aggravated by drought, irrigation water low in boron and high in calcium, and by heavy applications of lime. And here we just have an example of boron deficiency. Other nutrient deficiencies, nickel, especially in river birches, it's going to create what we call mouse ears. Here, as you can see, the leaves are actually curled over and they look like little mouse ears. And then if we correct the problem, we're going to get that new flush of growth at the time. It's going to come out, full, healthy leaves, and then you can still see some of the smaller ones behind this new growth. Fertilization practices. Are plant symptoms, Are plant systems due to a nutrient deficiency, or is it because there's too much, a toxicity? Are they caused by pesticides? Some pesticides will actually damage the plant. Drought, is it excessive moisture? Is it temperature? Could it be soil or air pollution? Or even compaction or physical injury may be done at the time of planting. The plant's location will impact the fertility program and plant response. Faster growing plants will respond more rapidly than slower growing plants. And then the greatest growth response of landscape plants results from nitrogen. We've already talked about that. And there will be no response to added P or K unless the soil is deficient in these elements. You will see results in turf grass, but when it comes to ornamentals and trees, we're not going to see a dramatic change to our woody plants and trees unless the soil is deficient in phosphorus and potassium. Bedding plants apply 1.0 to 3.6 pounds of nitrogen per 1,000 square feet of the bed area, depending on the plant species we are using, the soil texture and how we've amended the soil, and the precipitation or irrigation and the type of fertilizer that we are using. And this, it would be good to incorporate your fertility program at the time of planting. Determine deficiencies or toxicities. 1, visual analysis. Guys, you're the experts, you're the horticulture professionals. You should be able to at least have a rough idea based on the plant symptoms. So you visually look at it. You might be able to be close, but at least come back to your office and look up the information and figure out what's going on. Or we can do a soil analysis or soil test. And then once we receive those results back, we're going to be able to interpret it. Here, as you can see, a soil sample. They've done their vegetable garden. They've taken 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 samples of their vegetable garden. Their backyard, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Front yard, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then in their trees and shrubs, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So they've taken all these samples of each area. And then they've got several different, they've got 4 locations that they wanted a soil test done for this property. Here we have some nutrient deficiency symptoms. I'm not going to read these all out for you. I just wanted to point these out. It's table 10.1. It is nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, calcium. It's got all the elements that we've talked about and what their deficiency symptoms for woody plants. This could actually be testable material, guys, for you on your exam. Here we have some general symptoms of common nutrient toxicities for the specific elements, and these are the main ones, table 10.2. Again, I'm not going to read all these for you, but nitrogen to some plants, azaleas, excess nitrates result in iron deficiency symptoms or interveinal chlorosis because of iron poor metabolism. Toxicity results in injury and death of the root system. Yellowing or bleaching of the new foliage may occur. So I could ask a question about that, and you might know that it is based on a nutrient toxicity of nitrogen. Interpreting soil test. All right, when we get our soil test back, the macronutrients are going to be stated in pounds per acre. The micronutrients are going to be stated in parts per million. So just think micro would be a part of a million. It's small. Macronutrients are going to be pounds per acre, a lot more heavier application. So 1 part per million, though, is equivalent to approximately 2 pounds of acre at plow depth of 6 to 8 inches. And then the conversion from the element to fertilizer form and vice versa is stated here. So we have the element form, phosphorus. We're going to go to that superphosphate. To the fertilizer form, we're going to multiply it by 0.44. We're going to see some examples. And then if we need to go back from the fertilizer form back, my apologies, I did this vice versa. Here we have the element form is equivalent to the superphosphate times 0.44. Superphosphate is equivalent to the phosphorus element form times 2.3. Same thing with potassium. We've got our potassium is equivalent to the fertilizer form times 0.83, and then the fertilizer form is equivalent to the element form times 1.2. So this is stated in your text. I would jot these down especially, and we're going to look at a few problems to kind of help clarify that. Examples. The soil test indicates that a site contains 20 pounds of phosphorus per acre. And you being the landscape manager, and I did a typo there, but the landscape manager wished to increase this to 80 pounds phosphorus per acre. So how much P2O5 would be required? Well, we want 80. We know there's 20, so that's going to give us 60 pounds of phosphorus is required to bring it up to the desired level. So we're going to take our 60 pounds, which is the phosphorus, times the 2.3 is going to give us 138 pounds of the superphosphate required. So to give us the 60 pounds per acre, we're going to have to multiply it by 2.3, and we're actually going to be applying 138 pounds of phosphorus to bring it up to the level we want. And then just another example here, to apply 100 pounds of potassium per acre would require 100 times 1.2, which will give us 120 pounds of the K2O. Foliar and tissue analysis. Foliage, tissue, or leaf determine the mineral element content within the plant. Sample between mid-June, mid-September, which is the mid-growing season for most plants. You need to collect them from mature leaves. You need to take from evergreens 30 to 100 leaves, or 130 leaves from deciduous plants, or 50 terminal cuttings from evergreens. Wash the samples with a 0.1% detergent to remove any dust or residue, and then seek professional advice when interpreting plants. My dad does this with his strawberry plants. He takes tissue samples, sends them off, and then the ag extension agent that specializes in strawberries, comes out to the farm and they go over the test, and then the ag agent recommends, what we need to do based on the tissue analysis. Fertilizers. They're sold as the oxides of phosphorus and potassium, not the amount of actual element. Remember, we just talked about the conversion rates. So a fertilizer containing all three major elements is said to be complete. Consider the following when buying a fertilizer, and this is over the next couple of slides. We want to consider the analysis of the grade. It is the percent by package weight of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium in the material. So a 20-10-15 fertilizer contains 20% nitrogen, 10% phosphorus, and 5% potassium. A 100-pound bag of 13-13-13 contains 13 pounds nitrogen, 13 pounds of phosphorus, and 13 pounds of potassium. A 15-pound box of 842 contains 1.2 pounds of nitrogen, 0.6 pounds phosphorus, and 0.3 pounds of potassium. And simply, guys, by getting that, we have a 15-pound box. We're going to divide 15 by 100, which gives us the 0.8. And then we're going to multiply the 0.15 times each one of the ratios here. And 0.15 times 8 gives us the 1.2 pounds of nitrogen. 0.15 times the 4 gives us the 0.6 pounds of phosphorus. And the 0.15 times your 2 will give you the 0.3 pounds of potassium in this 15-pound box of fertilizer. Here we have straight up 100 pound. So basically it's just 13 all the way across because it is based on a 100-pound bag. Ratio is the mathematical relationship of one fertilizer element to another within the analysis. So a 20-10-5 is really equivalent to a 4:2:1 ratio, whereas a 12-12-12 fertilizer has a ratio of 1:1:1, and we would want to consider that ratio when purchasing our fertilizer. We also want to consider the source of the nutrient. Is it fast or is it slow release? We, as landscape managers, prefer the slow release. We also need to determine or consider the handling ease, the method of application. Is it dry or liquid? And the labor requirements required to put it out. Me, guys, personally, I'm a big fan of a rotary spreader. I like putting out granular fertilizers, and I like spraying my pesticides. So that's my personal choice. That's how I would put this stuff out. May be totally different for you. We also need to take into consideration the price. Nitrogen is the cheapest. Phosphorus is the most expensive. Here we have some examples of cost. We're doing the ammonium nitrate, which is cost $15.50 per 100 pounds. So we're going to convert that to 0.1555 per pound divided by our 0.33% nitrogen. So it's going to cost 47 cents per pound of nitrogen. Our urea costs $16 per pound. So that's going to be equivalent to 0.16 per pound. We're divided by the 45%, which is 36 cents per pound of nitrogen. Even though this costs more per 100, when we're talking about pounds per nitrogen, the urea costs us less in terms of nitrogen. Types of fertilizers. We have inorganic, which are chemical salts providing readily available nutrients. We have our liquid or water-soluble sprays that most people in greenhouses and turf grass industries use. We have acidic, which is dry and soluble formulations that lower the pH over time. And then we have slow release. It reduces nutrient loss through leaching and provides controlled release of nutrients. Slow release and your liquids probably what you're going to use mostly in your lawn care business. Coatings, we have sulfur-coated urea, which is tied to temperature. The release rate is slower in the spring and fall than during the hot summer months. It's, the heat is making it release a lot quicker. Here's a slide of the urea that's in the center. It's got a poly plus coating on the outside, and then it's got the surface coating of the sulfur. So just a little information that I've put in the slide there for you. Here's some good information about the PolyPlus technology. So please take a look at that during your studies. Organic fertilizers. I put this in, guys, because we hear a lot of this about natural, organic based, a natural fertilizer. I just threw these definitions in here, guys. Natural products derived from animal, biological, mineral, plant source in the form is substantially the same as it occurs in nature. These materials may be altered and manipulated to improve distribution. So just pay attention to these definitions. Again, these could be test questions, but I threw this in here because I really, the book gives us a lot of tables, and not every one of them do I include in my lectures, but the ones that I've put in this one are pretty important, so I wanted you to pay attention to that. Application methods, surface dry application or surface liquid. Fertigation, that's the use of fertilizers run through irrigation systems. And then we have subsurface application, which we can do deep root, which we're going to have to punch or drill holes and then put our fertilizer in. Or we can have soil injections where we're taking a probe and we're actually injecting the dry or liquid fertilizer. And then we can have the tree spikes that we put around the trees. Here we have the Moget picture, and this is the Moget system, nutrients with a slight pressure. The gravity-fed system, we can use for iron sulfate, for iron chlorosis. But we see a lot of this right here, and I've put some good YouTubes on the Blackboard portal that you can actually see how to install one of these Moget systems. And then we can also do foliar applications where we're spraying our fertilizer up into the canopy of the tree. Soil reaction and adjusting the pH. Soil reaction or pH refers to the acidity or alkalinity of the soil. It is the measure of the relative concentration of hydrogen ions. The pH scale is logarithmic, so therefore a soil of pH is 10 times more alkaline than a soil with a pH of 5.0. The ideal range for most plant materials is 5 to 7.5. Most plants will tolerate that. Anything below 4.0 is toxic to all except of a few handful of plants. Soil pH can be adjusted by adding lime or sulfur. And then surface applications take longer to adjust the pH versus, they do have these new quicker release type lime applications that you can put out. But the traditional lime that creates all the dust and everything, it's going to take much longer to adjust that pH. And again, never apply more than 5 pounds of sulfur per 1,000 square feet of turf. Here we just have an example of the fast-acting lime. It raises the soil pH. This will act a lot faster than the traditional powdery, lime that creates all the dust that you usually have to wear a mask for. Usually these are coated, and you can put out, and it's going to change the pH and benefit the turf grass or plant a little bit quicker. All right, and this concludes this lecture. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please email me. On Blackboard, I have put the YouTube links, and for you guys to see the Mojay, and then some other type injections for trees. Thanks, and I'll see you guys later.